Hey guys, Mike Jensen here with Gription Gear, here to do some quick service on my Yamaha Grizzly. It's a 2014 550, and I am hearing a popping noise in the front end when I turn from left to right. I replaced the wheel bearing on one side and it seemed to have taken care of that problem, so I'm going to go ahead and do it on the other side.
Here's a quick tool list for you. Hopefully I capture everything you need.
12mm socket, 17mm socket, 19mm socket, 27mm socket, 14mm socket, large Phillips screwdriver, adjustable wrench, number 5 Allen wrench, 10mm open end wrench, 17mm open end wrench, hammer, dead blow hammer, snap ring pliers, grease, a torque wrench, a jack to raise up your four-wheeler. Alright, so I'm gonna remove the wheel, and then after that remove the brake caliper, and then I'm gonna disconnect the shock down here. And then I'm gonna remove the upper and lower ball joints along with the steering joint. Alright, I've got the wheel off. Now I'm gonna remove the 2 bolts holding the brake caliper on. Now that I got that caliper loose, just remove it and put it off to the side. Now pull this cap off. And next I'll be pulling that nut off. This nut was really difficult to get off the first time. From the factory it comes with the outer housing of this nut dented into this area. Before you do anything or try to put any force on it, you're better off just grabbing a punch or a screwdriver or something and doing your best to bend that out. Once you do that, pick up a breaker bar and you should be able to apply the brakes and break that free. If not, you'll have to find some other way to keep this from spinning while you break that nut free. One way that I was able to keep this from spinning is putting a screwdriver through this channel and into that hole, and then that locks it up from spinning while you break this nut free. You want to be careful you don't put it against other pieces here because it'll easily bend this flange. And then as you're breaking it free, you don't want this driver moving around too much or it's going to elongate that hole where your brake caliper goes. Now that we've got that nut free, this whole thing just slides right off. Next, we're going to remove this flange using a large Phillips screwdriver. Next, I'm going to remove the upper and lower castle nuts holding the ball joints on, and also the castle nut holding the steering rod on. There's one cotter pin holding each of those on. Alright, next I've got to get this plastic panel off so that I can get at this shock bolt. Once I get that off, then I should be able to knock these pieces free. So this plastic cover comes off just with this one bolt. Once you get that bolt out, there's a couple fingers holding it on, but it just pulls right off. So you got to get the open end wrench on one side and the ratchet on the other. Then it'll come right off. And the first time I pulled this shock off, I was worried that it'd be under a lot of force, but it's actually not too bad. I should be able to just actually pull this bolt right out. And the shock is free. Alright, with all those pieces off, there's nothing holding this assembly on except for the compression fitting between each of these ball joints. So I'll just be taking a hammer and actually knocking those out. And I'll try it with a rubber mallet first so that I don't mess up the threads. I had some trouble with that on the last one. But if that doesn't work, then I'll just have to resort to the hammer. So the rubber mallet was not sufficient, so I just partially threaded the nut at the bottom of these threads to help prevent damage, and then I tapped that with the hammer until it popped out. And you just got to do the same thing on all 3 joints. Because this top one is difficult to get at, I actually used an open-end adjustable wrench to get at that nut there. And now that I have 2 of the joints off, this shaft will actually just push out, and I can carefully maneuver that to get this hanging free, and that'll open it up for me to pound on that last nut. Now I've got that joint free and this whole thing rotated to the side. I've got the partially threaded nut on there, and I can just hit that with the hammer to get it out. And we're free. The whole upright just comes off. Now the challenge is get that bad boy out, replace it with a new one, and hopefully that popping sound will be gone. This ring will just come right out with a pair of snap ring pliers. Alright, now I'm going to take the largest socket I have, place it on the back side of this bearing. I know just by observation that it pushes from this side out to this side. So you just position that socket and smack the heck out of it with your dead blow hammer. After I got the bearing flush with this surface here, I moved it over to my vise just to give it something to rest on. Then you keep the socket in there and just keep at it. Finally it dropped out. This bearing is listed as a Kawasaki part, but it's actually identical to the Yamaha part. It's got the exact same markings on it. You can see there, side by side, they're identical. The Yamaha bearing was listed at about 50, 60 bucks a piece, whereas this one was only 18 bucks. So I'll go with that guy. Alright, now we're ready to install the new bearing. I've just applied a very thin film of grease along the outer surface and the inner surface here. And basically we're just going to line it up the best we can, as straight as we can, and slowly pound it in. I'm going to use this board on top to help protect the bearing whenever I need to. Alright, the bearing's in. As I was pounding the bearing in with the mallet, the bearing does kind of rock from side to side. You just got to be careful not to get it too off kilter. And you can slowly get it in, and then eventually I moved it over to the vise once again just to get a hard surface to work with. And I used the socket to seat it down into place. Now that our bearing's in, we just use our snap ring pliers snap that right back in. Now we're ready to just do everything in reverse, put it back together. Alright, so I'm told by the dealer that the torque setting for this guy is 18 foot-pounds, then 25 foot-pounds, and for the lower ball joint, 22 foot-pounds. So I'll just go ahead and set my torque wrench and tighten those down. After you get those torqued down, then you just align the holes and insert your cotter pins. Alright, got everything back together. Haven't lowered it down yet, but it doesn't seem to have the same popping noise as before. Basically that popping noise that I mentioned. If I put a foot here and pull down on the top, I was able to, if you put a lot of force on it, I could just hear a slight pop. And when I was riding, like I said, turning right and left, every once in a while it would pop, and I just knew it was going to get worse and worse, so had to locate the problem.
I just rode it around and it totally fixed the problem. Thanks for watching, and check us out on griptiongear.us.